me to see this differently. Help me to reframe this. Help me to see what's positive in this awful thing that just happened, and doing that is like a really powerful way to not only stay connected, but to help each other in a way that's positive, and to know that you can reach for that other person for that, instead of that other person being like, oh my gosh, that's horrible, I can't believe that happened. And you continue down that downward spiral. They kind of, let me hold it with you, let me hold it, but then let's see what we can do to release it, and to look at it in a way that's going to be helpful.
Yeah, and I think, even in time, especially in times like this, I think that we tend to, just as human beings, we like to sort of pile on, like, oh, you think you've got it bad? Let me tell you about this, and it just sort of becomes, like Nancy said, that downward spiral, where you're just sort of trying to one up each other with negativity, which, in the moment seems like a big competition, who's got it the worst, but in the end, you realize it's not serving anyone.
So and I loved that answer, by the way, how could you do it? How could you take that? Because I can hear people watching this right now going, well, yeah, we all have bad days, negative stuff. And like, I call my best friend and we talk about, they did it, and then they did it. So how do you create that? I do this. I'm blessed to have 7 best friends, and we do the best to do what you're talking about, where if someone calls, someone's upset, and we say, okay, I understand this is what happened, but let's take you forward and let's brainstorm. How important is it to brainstorm with other people?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important. And I think that what you had just said sort of puts it in a nutshell, right? We can sit in the space of the problem and ruminate over and over again about this happened and this happened, or we can move forward towards a solution. I think we all want to feel good. That is our ultimate goal in life, right? So why would we sit and marinate in the problem when we could talk about, okay, what are the next steps? How do we move forward in a way that feels good, that feels joyful?
Yeah, and that said, we always like to point out that we recognize that nobody is capable of being happy all the time. And that's not at all what we're saying. What we're saying is we all have a range of emotions. And when something happens, we have to fully feel that. So a lot of what we do together is that space of allowing, let me sit in this with you together. And once, and because it has to be fully out, right? It has to be fully processed, fully felt. We're not saying don't feel it and put it away and be happy. That's not what we're saying. Feel it as long as you need to feel it. And Kim and I have had really difficult times in the last 5 years, deaths in our immediate families, difficult times. And we're very, very, very clear with each other. There's no timetable. There's no timetable. And we allow each other the space that we need. But we also are like, but let me work with you. Let me help you when you're ready. I think that's a really important thing to point out.
That's a crucial message. It's a very, very crucial message. Some people push each other, say, when there's a death in the family, they'll say the worst stuff. Just get over it, just move on. There's like a plan. None of that is helpful. Like none of it is helpful when someone is hurting. I'm so glad you guys touched on this. Giving people time to go through their grief, to support them. It's you and I, the 3 of us know that the true people in your life when you go through the hard times, not the good times. It's when life is hard is when you find out who your true friends are. We're here to educate. How could people transform their lives if they did something once a day? What could you teach them to do in that day?
Yeah, I would say for me, gratitude is a really big piece of that. And, I think positivity stems from that. It grows out of the gratitude. And when we were just talking about the hard times and allowing, being in that space of allowing, I think that in particular when we were going through some challenging times in our personal lives, it's that choice of, I want to remember all of the happy times. I want to hold the space for the beauty of that relationship that occurred, during the time they were alive, rather than really being consumed by the sorrow that they're no longer with us. And I know I'll share, my father passed away, and
I'm
of course,
sorry.
no, thank you. There were a lot of emotions that went through, but I decided to get this digital frame that I put in my house, and I loaded it up with pictures of him, and him with my kids and him with me. And at first it was heart-wrenching to walk through the kitchen and see those pictures. But over time, it brought a smile to my face, and it still does, to really feel those feelings and remember the importance of his presence in my life, instead of really being sort of, really wallowing in the sadness of the fact that he's no longer here.
Yeah. And we've done a lot of work actually with grief and joy, right? And how can they coexist? And one of the things that we point out is the difference between happiness and joy. That and you always say that a little bit better than I do, but that happiness, you better say it.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, so happiness is an emotion, right? And it's something that we feel when things are going well in life. And that's awesome. It's great when things are going well, but when things are not going well, it's okay to be sad or disappointed or angry. Those are all valid emotions, and we should feel them. But joy, we say, is an attitude. It's really the way you navigate through life. And it has nothing to do with outside circumstances. It has to do with a choice that we make, that we want to experience inner peace as we move through life.
And so if we can make joy a choice. So what does that mean? So my brother died in May, so it's quite recent. And what by saying to myself, what can I find today that was joyful? Just one thing, just one. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be, I think a lot of times when we talk about finding joy or happiness, people think it's got to be something enormous. Mm-hmm. But, we're doing a lot of research into this idea of jolts of joy, right? So what is joyful? Being with my friend, that's joyful. A cup of tea, sitting outside and looking at a beautiful flower, So one thing you can do today, one thing anybody can do is just concentrate on what it is, first of all, that brings me joy. And then just try to find one jolt of joy. And if you're in a horrible time, you might be able to just find one jolt. The whole day, but just that one thing is going to help you just lift up just a tiny little bit, and that is within your control.
Mm-hmm. So, and that is wonderful. Do you think it's a good idea for them to write something down that they're joyful for?
Yes, I'm a big fan of journaling, and I'm also a big fan of gratitude journaling and the like. And I think that oftentimes, when we hit a difficult time in life, we get ourselves into the mindset of nothing's going right? Mm-hmm. Nothing is good in my life. And so having that journal or something you can refer back to remind yourself, oh, that's right. There's this and there's this and there's this and there's people who love me and there's beautiful nature that's surrounding me. And, sometimes we need that reminder. And there are times when we just can't come up with it, ourselves. And so having it written down, I think, is really helpful.
And if the idea of a journal, like I'm a writer and I don't want to journal, right? And maybe it's just because I'm writing for work, but what I find helps me is just like one sentence. Like, so if you don't want to make a whole journal, sometimes just like one sentence, one thing that you can say to yourself that you can kind of maybe just write that one thing down and pin it on a mirror or something, like one thing that's going to be meaningful for you. I think that's enough.
Yeah,
right?
I would say so. Yeah. And I think Andrew was referring before to my mantra that everything is unfolding perfectly. And I have a lot of different mantras, but that one I return to over and over again, because it's just sort of a reminder. And I think that oftentimes in hindsight, we can see that, but in the moment it's very hard. But when I repeat the mantra, it's helpful as a reminder.
Yeah, Kim has a whole bunch of mantras. I just curse.
I love both of you right now. So